So a stealth applicant is one that makes a first point of contact through your application.
Right.
And that is generally what we're talking about. And we could almost do an entire conference on stealth application and getting into the whole piece on marketing. We're not going to get too much into the marketing piece on it, but we'll touch on it just a bit. But one thing we'll say right here on this piece, which is brand marketing generally doesn't speak to, adult learners in general. I don't know if you're experiencing that with your schools, but a lot of your brand marketing efforts don't speak to adults. And you may have experienced this with use of images in your schools. My colleague, the director of admissions, is here. I don't want to make her cringe, but some of your imagery at your school, we had, the 18-year-old doing the cartwheel across the grass, does not speak to adult imagery. Starting to cringe. I can see her. She's already cringing. Does not speak to your adult learner. Yet, it is likely to attract some of your websites and your overhaul marketing campaigns. Still is likely to attract stealth applicants because they are applying. So if you still need to do, if we can, you'll see multi-source attribution in your marketing campaigns. And if you take a look down, when we're promoting your online degrees, you are using multiple formats to do all of your marketing. If you look at all the different sorts of ways that you're marketing to online students, you're doing email, you're doing websites, you're doing Facebook campaigns, you're doing search engine listings. And then if you look down at the bottom, you're going to see what your influencers are and the percentages. And we can make these slides available to you if you want to see us afterwards, and we can exchange business cards. We are glad to talk to you about this. Again, we don't want to get too much into the marketing side, because the point is the stealth applicant is applying with no direct contact from your staff.
Right. And like our astronaut Leland talked about, when you don't see someone who looks like you, you don't have a propensity then to want to reach out or be connected to it. So when you don't see images that look like you see people doing cartwheels, and you're 40-something working in the field, you're more likely to apply without reaching out to that admissions rep, because you're expecting the conversation to be for someone that's not you. Right? So it's just something to be mindful of in your efforts.
Right. So what can potentially be a problem is the stealth applicant has applied and they may be underqualified. So this can be a problem with faculty who now have an applicant who is below your 3.0. We had an experience with this with our group, and it circles back with, that you now have an applicant who does not meet the 3.0 requirement. If you have that, and if the circle of enrollment is like that in your school, you're like, well, how did your enrollment team recruit this type of candidate to come into the school? And we're like, well, no, we didn't recruit this group, this student. They were a stealth app, and now we have to define what a stealth applicant is. So, they may be underqualified, but this is your first opportunity to talk with the student, and you have to be quick about it, because now you may be able to recruit them into or talk with them about, is there an opportunity to go into a different program or work with the student, but speed is going to be critical, because this is your only opportunity. They've applied, it's very quick, and is there a different message that you can talk with them about?
Some institutions see stealth applicants as a problem. Something's wrong with our marketing. Something's wrong with the way we're doing things. I would advocate you flip that, and you see it as a great opportunity, because they've connected with your institution in some way. So now you've got a chance. Now you've got a chance to get in front of the person and connect with them and learn more about their needs and potentially move them into a program that's a better fit. So instead of worrying about tweaking the marketing, if this person's come to you, maximize that opportunity and then lead the pack of the institutions that are out there instead of pushing that away. Right. Welcome those kinds of applicants and then work with them. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Excellent. So stealth applicants are likely to not want to talk to you. They're not going to want to talk to your admissions team. They prefer to do research on their own. That's what's brought them this far. So it's an important thing to think about. Do they have to talk to you? Do they have to talk to your admissions team? Is that really a requirement that you use to make an admissions decision? It's just something to challenge yourself on, as thinking sort of going beyond the theme of the conference, right? A lot of times they've done their homework on your institution, but they're likely to have some misinformation because they might not have used all the resources you would prefer that they've looked at, right? So there is definitely an opportunity for clarification when you have a stealth app. Don't assume because they've done some research that it's accurate. Make sure you're reaching out and giving them some additional resources that are from your institution, not necessarily something that might be out there. This is fascinating, this next thing.
Many of you are probably familiar with the Aslanian group. You heard Carol speak yesterday. This is a crazy statistic. They did a comp study in 2006. Students were shopping about 12 to 18 schools. This is the average. Against 2016, the outlier is about 49 schools.
It's wild.
49 schools. And this is just the power of search engines and Google and data. I mean, this is just the amount of information that they have before they get to you on their own. They don't even need to talk to you anymore. So once you have that application, this is the Stealth app. This is the ability of information that they have at their disposal and their reach before they apply to you. So amazing amount of shopping that they're doing before they apply to you. So once you have that application, that's gold.
Right.
That is gold right there. So.
Yeah. And I would also suggest that you consider accepting those students without requiring a voice-to-voice connection. Some kind of connection is critical, but it's likely to be email or text messaging, which tends to be the preferred modality of communication for this group. So giving that some thought to your process. So Daria already mentioned speed. So has anybody ever secret shopped a for-profit or, like me, have a background in the for-profit space? Okay, did you have to change your phone number after, right? Yeah. They are so fast and so relentless, for lack of a better term, on their contact strategies, and it's been a very effective strategy for them. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating that you go that far. I often joke there's a difference between stalking and supporting, right? So you want to have the supportive outreach strategy, not the stalking strategy that makes people hate your institution when they hear the name. So you do want to be very thoughtful about how fast you're responding. I think our average response time is around 7 minutes or shorter. For when someone requests information to when they're getting some kind of personalized outreach. And that's another real key here. Personalize your emails. The lower tech you go and the more kind of text, real message you send, usually the higher the response rates. When you send real flashy, pretty, I mean, they're beautiful, some of the emails that come out, but they're not personal. The person receiving that knows for sure that that's a marketing auto-generated email. If you send something that has their name, it looks like someone wrote it from a real person, that tends to get a higher click rate and response rate. So just something there to think about. I mentioned my favorite joke about stalking versus supporting, and I did work for the dark side of the force. I worked for University of Phoenix for a while, and they do a lot of things really, really well, really well. But you do want to be careful that you're monitoring your contact rates for what your institution's needs are. So a typical sweet spot to start with is 15 attempts to contact in the first 10 calendar days or until you make human connection. Right? That's an often starting point that we utilize. 15 attempts is a mix of calls, emails, and texts, 5, 5, and 5, spread out over different times. But you want to measure your results because sometimes that's way too aggressive and other times that is not even close to enough. So I'll give you an example. We have an institution in rural Tennessee that we got the worst feedback from students. This 15 and 10 was way too aggressive. So we quickly pivoted and we ended up at an 8 attempts in 10 calendar days. And that was their sweet spot to maximize of all the people that requested information, how many of them were we able to contact. We have a school that we work with, well, your school.
Yeah.
We have to go with the 15 and 10 because we're competing in the Philly market. I don't know how familiar all of you are of the Philly market, but it is dense, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
A lot of competition. So we need to be a little more assertive. But monitoring your contact rates in these suggested windows will help you very quickly make the pivots you need for the type of students that are requesting information from your institution.
And you can do this. I mean, we're a small, private Catholic school. You know, you don't have to be big to do this. Like, just don't think that, you know, oh my God, I can't do this at my school. We're too small. We don't have enough staff to do this sort of thing. We have too many programs. Like, this can be done, and every student counts. I mean, every student makes a difference, and after a while, I mean, we look at our return. We do a lot of circle of assessment and data, and word of mouth is one of our biggest sources of return in our marketing effort. So every student makes a difference. So this is very, very important, and I'm fascinated by stealth applicants, which is you know why we're presenting on this, and it is becoming more and more important to watch stealth applicants because people don't want to talk to people anymore, especially busy adults. So, you know, I would really encourage you to watch this field of study and see if you can track this information. So,
Yep.
really, really.
All right, so now we're going to jump into students that are actually starting in classes, and we're going to talk to you about some common obstacles that we see, particularly coming from these stealth applicants that start classes. And then we're going to pivot quickly to talk about solutions, right, because we want to go beyond. But first, let's talk about some of the hurdles that some of the stealth applicants tend to bring to the table. So obviously, the number one concern continues to be the same year after year in that online college student survey: cost, time commitment. They're at everyone's top of mind. We also see a lot of adults who are stealth applicants having concerns about not having appropriate prereqs to get into some of the curriculum that they want to be taking, that they're most interested in, that they haven't taken a standardized test in a while and really aren't keen on doing it again later in life. Lack of confidence is a big one. There's been some really interesting research around retention, and one of the top predictors of persistence is whether people think they can persist or not. That confidence in their ability is one of the key predictors. So that's been a real challenge for adults who are getting back into the education world. Lots of document requirements is another challenge. Is this going to have a return on investment for me? Is this going to be worth it for me in my stage of life? And then changing of career paths.
Yeah, and just thinking about some of the concepts we've heard over the course of the conference in, you know, what are we really trying to do? Are we really trying to create barriers for students to get an education, or are we really trying to break them down? And so over the past couple of years at Alvernia, we really have been looking at prereqs, standardized testing, and you know, lack of confidence, or we call it the fear factor at Alvernia. And we have really been trying to just get rid of some of these barriers for admission for students, and really looking at it as a circle of assessment and asking questions, why, and what if we don't do these things anymore? And it's been tough conversations with faculty of, you know, why do we have a 3.0 required? Why do we have 3 letters of recommendation? Why do we have the GREs required? Why do we do this? I'm trying not to get into look at the director of admissions, because these are tough questions. But like, why do we do this? And we do a circle of assessment now with our admission standards. And do we actually use these for any real purpose in our admission requirements? And if we don't use them, we're getting rid of them. And are these really admission standards, or are these really academic progression requirements that we should have later on once the student is admitted? You know, and on the theory of a stealth app, they've chosen you. They've already chosen you amidst all these other schools. So why are we not allowing them to be a student at your institution over these 48 other schools, and allow them to be at your institution knowing how much we invest into our marketing efforts and our enrollment, our recruitment campaigns? So we have started to get rid of required GPAs and make them recommended. We've started reduced letters of recommendation because are we really using them or are we just checking boxes off of them? We're not lowering our standards, but are we really using them in our admission requirement? Are we actually using them for any purpose other than to just check off a box? Like if there's actually a reason for it, we're really challenging our faculty to say, do you actually use this for any reason? And if not, why? What if we didn't? And if there's a reason that they can say we use it, then fine, we'll keep it. But if not, we're suggesting to get rid of it. You have to demonstrate it, no different than any other assessment work. And we're having, I don't want to say success as if it's a good thing to get rid of it, but you know, we're starting to break down some barriers. So just a thought to take back to your schools to get rid of some of those barriers to education.
And it's not harming the retention rates.
It's not harming the retention rates.
And I think that's key, right? We don't want to set students up to fail. So we want to make sure that they have appropriate admission requirements for the rigor of the program. However, we're seeing that taking away some of the check the box items is not having a negative impact on the student's ability to persist and to graduate. And that's something you want to keep an eye on. So speaking of solutions, stealth applicants are busy. And if you're already a partner with us, you probably have all of these services happening. If you're not, I'll try to give you a quick summary of something you can take away and potentially apply at your institution. So tuition planning. Tuition planners are a bridge between the admissions team and the team of financial aid advisors at the institution. And my favorite joke about tuition planning is that their job description should be talk students off the ledge, because that's really kind of the function that they play. They answer basic questions about federal financial aid, about ways to borrow, about responsible borrowing. Could they do a personal contribution? So they really set the stage for the student to have all of the intel they need to make a good decision about their financial aid. They can also be really useful in taking some of the burden off your federal or your financial aid processors so that they can actually focus on awarding and packaging, which is a very labor-intensive part of the process. So this team can handle a lot of those kinds of questions. Transcript collection is probably one of my favorite things that we offer. So our teams will collect transcripts on behalf of the student from formerly attended institutions. It sounds like such a simple thing, right? For those of us in academia, obviously, we know how it works, we know how the registrar functions, but busy adults, this is a real obstacle. So what I recommend and what we do is we have students sign a release form giving us permission to go ahead and request the transcripts on their behalf. We pay the fees, we do the requesting, we do the follow-up. It is a real impact on your apt to accepted conversions. You can see almost an immediate result on the number of applicants that move to an accepted status when you implement something like transcript collection. And then speaking of transcripts, a lot of these students have attended other institutions and they want to know how many credits are going to transfer. So having a quick turnaround time on unofficial pre-evaluations of transfer credit is critical with stealth apps. This is a group that really wants to know the answer to that question. So we recommend a 24-hour turnaround time on those kinds of evaluations and building out your team to do that if possible. I know these things have been a real game changer with Alvernia.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So Derry, you already kind of talked about this, but I don't know if you wanted to add any additional thoughts of kind of re-engineering the admission requirements.
Yeah, and this is something that we didn't do in the beginning, but helping get students registered on their behalf is another thing that helps students feel, you're doing them a bit of help for them, like let's help you get registered. Another thing that can help a busy adult feel better about, you're doing a service for them, for the institution. So we know it's like, well, you should be doing this on your own, but still it endears them to the institution. Best practice is to schedule a year out. We have not mastered this yet at Alvernia. I can't even say that we are ahead of this game at all. It would be ideal, but we are still working on this. Maybe check back in a year. Hopefully we have this under control, but we are still working ahead. We're still working on this, but still.
Okay, so another thing to think about is how many prerequisites you're putting into the curriculum, and do they truly have skills that are required for that next course? It's really what Daria was talking about, is kind of challenging your thinking about the way things are set up. Is this something we do because we've always done it? Or is this really a scaffolding course that is necessary for their learning? If it's necessary, by all means, keep it. But there are some courses that might not be required and are barriers for students. And I know you have an example on prior learning assessment.
I still, it's the why and what happens if we don't. That sort of question. And then PLA is another option to maybe address some of the prereqs, that if there are, is PLA an option for your school? And PLA is not just about transferring credit, but PLA also gets into some of, and in the next slide, we're going to start talking about career planning and career getting into the funnel at the beginning. And you heard that mentioned yesterday with Carol and David. But career discussions at the front of the funnel, and when your enrollment are talking to a stealth applicant, if you're so lucky, is critical, because prior learning assessment is not just about portfolio and credit transferring and skills for life, but it starts talking about what have you experienced in your life that transfers well into being a successful student? Because most adults, when they're coming back to school, are just afraid. It's not just about money. It's not about, can I manage this in my schedule? But most of the time, it is about what I said earlier, this fear factor. And I'm afraid I'm going to fail in front of other students and my peers. And when you start doing this sort of motivation-focused interview with students through the PLA process, that is one of the best sort of skills that your enrollment team can do. And then you're going to get the benefit of credit on the transcript as well. I mean, that's going to be your outcome, but this PLA discussion is going to be such a bonding experience for your enrollment team.
Yeah. It really sends a powerful message. It says, we value your learning. We value you as a learner. What you bring to the table actually means something and matters. That's a powerful message for a new adult student to be thinking about, and definitely a confidence booster. The raging bias confession about to come out. So I confess I have a psych background, right? So this is probably my favorite part of what we do, and what I would recommend that your teams do as well, is really think about getting to the core motivation of the adult learner that you're interacting with, or really any learner that you're interacting with. And when I say core motivation, I'm not talking about I want to make more money. I'm not talking about I want a better job. I'm talking about what those things do for people. Right? So getting to that kind of meaningful expression of why you're doing this crazy thing of spending all this money and going back to school and taking all this time and energy. I'm working on my doctorate right now, sorry, that's kind of coming out. But yeah, it's happening right now. But you really need to help people connect with their why, so that they can get through some of those challenges that they're inevitably going to face as they go through a rigorous program. So that's critical. Now, you do also have to be mindful, though, that some of your learners aren't going to want to play that game, right? So nurses are not going to want to have that discussion mostly. That's a big generalization. But most of the time, nurses, I have to do this to maintain my position. I'm at a magnet hospital. Okay, fair enough. You know what you're doing. You know why you do it. We don't have to have a deep, meaningful discussion about your life goals, unless you want to. Right? But if you can draw that out of someone, it sets you up for so much better work when you're into the persistence side of what we do, right? And it also lets you connect their goals to your curriculum. So if you can start digging into what somebody's really passionate about and excited about, like say a social work student, and they're telling you the story of what's inspired them, and you can go, oh my gosh, we have a course on child development that speaks to exactly what you're excited about. Listen to this course description. And it gets the person connected, their goals, to your curriculum. That's a tremendous buy-in, right? Even if you have to do it over text or email, it's still worth doing to try to dig into that, connecting the curriculum to the motivation. And making sure, and then also making sure it is the right connection, You know, sometimes you might hear someone's life goal and their motivation and go, ooh, I am not sure that matches what we've got. You might actually want to take a peek at this program to set them up for that success.
How many of you do PLA at your school?
Nice.
Okay. Yep. So Kale is the champion for that. They were just moderated the last session. So you could always go onto their website. They have the 10 points, the best practice for PLA, nationally known. So if you haven't developed one, you could go onto their website. If not, be glad to connect with you. We wrote the piece for our school based on Kale. They also do an external audit for your school. So be
They're
glad
a
to help
great
you with that if
resource.
you need it. Yep.
Yeah, and so is Daria.
Yep.
So we also kind of referenced career planning, and that came out in the online college student survey, particularly for first-generation students. So this is something that people often think about doing at the end of a degree program. We're actually advocating you start it in the enrollment process, and then very early in their journey with you. Start asking questions about strengths, a strength-oriented discussion. Asking questions about your ideal job. In a perfect world, if you didn't have to have a job, what would you do? Tell me about the ideal. Get people dreaming a little bit. Talk about job trends in their areas of interest. Encourage them to do some research. Give them some resources. And then make sure that there's an alignment between what they're looking for and the plan that you're having them pursue. Because you can make those changes earlier with a lot less implication, right? So strongly advocate for career-minded discussions very early in their process, not waiting till the end. All right, the dreaded stop out. So people call this lots of different things, leave of absence, drop. So it depends on how you define stop out. So what we're talking about stop out is someone who's not currently in classes, but is not withdrawn from your institution. So just for the sake of this discussion, that's kind of what we're talking about.
So we are doing a review right now on the DFWs for our online population only, with Julie's help actually. So it's very interesting. So we're looking right now at students who have earned a DFW in their first course with us, and looking at how that affects our stop out rate. And one of the things that we're looking at is this first bullet is what a confirmation of this self-image at the point of enrollment. So we just talked about when students are coming in earlier in the enrollment phase, that the biggest fear that they have is not affordability, can I manage it, but failure. And what happens if they earn this dreaded D, F, or they've withdrawn in the first course? What does that actually mean to them? It confirms what? That I can't do it.
Right.
I was right. I'm not supposed to be here. I can't do it. I am in fact a failure. Look at what I just earned. And so we are starting to do an audit now of students in those courses to figure out what it is. Is it the course? Is it the student? Is it the, and this is scary for everybody at the institution, faculty, course, but it's important for us to take a look at that with an audit team partner. So we're looking at it by course, program, start date, and really trying to circle it back to see what are we going to do with this information to try to preserve and save students who are going to stop out as a result of perhaps a DFW in course number 1.
So be careful here as you're looking at your data that you don't jump to conclusions.
Right.
So one classic example, it wasn't with Alvernia, but one classic example I talk about is we saw students that were starting in the summer B term, so starting in like June, July, in a particular program, it was a nursing program, they were failing at much higher rates than students that started in any other term. So what's your knee-jerk reaction to that? Don't start that term, right? Like, don't have the RN to BSN, RN to BSN launch in that term. Right. Well, what we ended up finding out was the way the curriculum was set up, they took a really heavy kinesthesiology class and a really heavy stat class in the same term if they started summer B. You're an adult learner, You haven't been to school in a while, you're learning online, and you're taking kinesiology and stats. That makes me want to cry, and I'm pretty comfortable with online, right? So we looked at that curriculum, and we just changed it to match all of the other terms, and the retention rates and the pass rates went right back up. So I just want to caution you that when you're analyzing this data, be really mindful of digging for the root cause. Because sometimes it's not what it looks like on the surface. It's not just stop doing that term. We also have seen programs. So this is something we looked at with Alvernia. We noticed the MBA rates were really strong.
Right.
Pass rates were high in the first couple courses, so we didn't see a lot of concern there. But there was a bachelor's in health science.
Healthcare science.
Yes, healthcare
Right.
science. That we saw some real concerning numbers of Ds, Fs, and withdraws in those first couple courses. So we started doing a lot more support with our retention team reaching out. We considered all of those students at risk initially, so that we were doing a lot of outreach, and it really did start to show a lift in the results. We provided a lot more resources, a lot more direction than we might normally in a program. So those are the kinds of things you want to be looking for as you're doing that kind of an analysis, and then measure whether your interventions are having that desired impact. All right, another raging bias about to come out with my background in psych, sorry. So appreciative advising is the model that we utilize with Learning House Wiley. And is anybody familiar with appreciative advising or appreciative inquiry? Okay, great. So sorry if it's review, but it's a really valuable tool in the way you interview students both on the enrollment side of things as well as once they're existing in your courses. And it's based on positive psychology research, looking at maximizing people's strengths, their inherent strengths, so that they can focus on that to be successful. Because again, the research tells us belief in their ability to succeed is a tremendously valuable thing to predict persistence. So these kinds of questions inspire some of that belief to be developed for adults. So there's 4 or 5 Ds, depending on who you talk to in the appreciative inquiry space. But here are the 4 that are relevant to our purposes, in my opinion. So a discovery type of question. So have you overcome obstacles in your past experiences in high school or other challenges? Tell me how you did that. It gets them thinking about ways they've succeeded in the past, right? How will completing this degree impact your life and improve your life? So here again, we're at the forward-thinking questions, getting people thinking future-oriented. What's the next step to make sure you are prepared to succeed? I love that question because it's an action question. It's not a, I think I'm going to. It's a, what are you gonna actually do? What's your next step? Let's get that planned, right? And then destiny. So when are you gonna do it? And how can I help you make sure that that actually happens? That's another powerful question, as long as you actually follow up, right? So you have to document what they give you permission to do. So back in my enrollment days, I had a student say to me, I'm doing this because my grandmother, who recently passed away, it was her dying wish that I finish my bachelor's. Okay, that's heavy. That is a really intense, powerful reason for being. So I said, do I have your permission to remind you of that if you start struggling? Because I need you to tell me that that's okay. Because I don't think I can do that without your permission. So inevitably, she started to struggle about 3 months later, and I called her and I said, okay, you told me it was okay to do this. What would your grandmother think? And of course, pregnant pause. All right, I'll keep going. You know, that kind of stuff is so powerful to ask the question of what's your next step, and then how can I make sure I help you? Getting their permission to ask and to give them those tough reminders and those tough comments when they need it most, right? And then obviously reflecting back on the motivation that they had when they were inspired and excited. Make sure that your admissions team is documenting their reasons so that your retention team, if it's a different team, can remind them, can have that. Well, it looks like when you were first signing up for these courses, you were really excited about how this was gonna change your impression on your grandchildren, right? Or that this was gonna set your family up for a new legacy. Remind them of those kinds of things. Make sure you've documented that from the beginning. You have an awesome story about this.
Yeah, so again, there's so many, we're in the realm right now of stop outs, and there's so many ways to prevent and address stop outs. So we're just giving you some examples, and so I'm kind of bleeding out from the Alvernia side right now. So we've learned so much in our work in online that we're applying it to our groundwork, and we have a school in Philadelphia. And so what we do now on the enrollment capture side is we have a conversation with our students, and our center director will capture all of this information at our day, and all, when the student comes in, and why do you want to be a student here at Alvernia, and what motivates you, and why are you here, and what are you excited about, and what will you do when times get tough, and we write it all in this envelope, on this note card, and then they seal it together, and they both sign off on it, and they put it in the folder, and they put it away, and they tuck it away, and it's like Julie said, it's like permission later to bring it out on days that get very difficult, and days will get difficult. We know times are difficult for adult learners. And this is what happens. And Dana Baker, our center director, will do this, and she'll bring out the envelope, and then they read it together, and they cry and they weep, and it's a motivating factor. And sometimes that same envelope is decided to go. That note gets back into the envelope, and sometimes it's taped shut. Or a new envelope, a new note card is now put in with the same one, and then goes back into the folder, and then we bring it out another day. And so, we're learning a lot from our online space into our ground programs, but it's a very bonding experience to help our stop outs stay enrolled, and we just keep going. Yep, we go beyond. So.
Nice.